The 282 laws carved into Hammurabi's stele. Law number 3, which prescribed death for anyone bringing a charge without proof, was invoked over 700 times in 50 years. The key to justice wasn't merely the law's existence, but its absolute, undeniable visibility. For the people of Babylon, the law was a 7-foot-tall pillar of black diorite, and keeping it legible was a task so important and dangerous that it gave rise to one of history's most secret and forgotten professions. We remember the scribes, stonemasons, and kings, but we have forgotten the Musherib, the shiners, the code steel polishers of Babylon. This was not a janitor's role. It was a sacred trust, a guild so exclusive its members were selected at childhood from orphanages, sworn to secrecy, and lived their entire lives in the temple's shadow. Their singular duty was to ensure that every wedge-shaped cuneiform character on Hammurabi's stele gleamed with unquestionable authority. Every morning, as the first sun struck the ziggurat, this silent group of men would approach the stele, the anonymous guardians of an empire's covenant, fighting a daily battle against the one thing that can erode law faster than any army: dust. Their tools were simple: finely woven linen cloths, buckets of clean water drawn from the Euphrates before the city awoke, and a guarded abrasive paste. This paste was a mixture of crushed river sand, filtered to an almost flour-like consistency, and a special, non-acidic oil. They worked in complete silence, their movements a slow, practiced ballet. One polisher applied a thin layer of water, another worked the paste in tiny circular motions, and a third would follow with a dry cloth, buffing the volcanic rock to a mirror finish. They spent hours a day ensuring that a farmer could see the law concerning his stolen ox just as clearly as a merchant. But their most important tool wasn't a cloth or an oil. It was an enforced vow of absolute silence. And the reason for this vow holds the key to their mystery. You see, every member of the Musherib had to possess a secret, dangerous skill. They were literate. In a society where less than 1% could read, the polishers had to be masters of cuneiform script. How else could they ensure they weren't accidentally eroding a crucial detail of a law? They knew the entire code by heart. They knew the fine distinctions between punishments for a free man versus a slave. They saw which laws the public gathered around, touched by anxious hands seeking guidance or angry hands seeking vengeance. They didn't just polish the stone. They were reading the city's soul, written in the dust and grime, and it was this intimate knowledge that allowed them to spot an anomaly, a subtle conspiracy happening in plain sight. The pressure on them was unimaginable. Diorite is one of the hardest stones on Earth, but centuries of polishing can wear anything down. If a polisher applied too much pressure, if their hands slipped and blurred a single wedge, they could be accused of altering the king's law. This was treason. The punishment was slow and public. Every day was a tightrope walk between duty and death. This focus allowed an elder polisher, a man named Nabu-shuma, to notice something others had missed. For 30 years, his hands had traced the contours of every law. He knew their feel, their texture in the dark. And he began to notice a recurring pattern of grime, a faint, almost invisible residue clustering around specific laws, the ones dealing with debt, land ownership, and merchant liability. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but the residue was different from the usual city dust and hand oils. He secretly scraped a tiny sample. Under a lens, he saw it contained fine clay particles and a sticky substance. It was a carefully applied mixture of clay and honey, almost invisible once dry, designed to catch more dust and blur the cuneiform just enough to create ambiguity. Someone was subtly editing the law, not by carving, but by calculated neglect, forcing the common man to rely on corrupt court scribes who would interpret the blurred laws in favor of the wealthy. Nabu-shuma shared his discovery with others in hushed tones after the temple gates were sealed. They were trapped. Their vow of silence was not just tradition, it was a command from the palace. To speak out, to to approach a vizier with their suspicions would force them to reveal their literacy. They would become a threat. In the paranoid courts of Babylon, a knowledgeable servant was a dangerous servant. They would likely be executed simply to silence them. Yet to do nothing was to be complicit in the slow poisoning of Hammurabi's justice. They couldn't speak out. But as masters of the stone's surface, they realized they could fight back in the one language they were allowed to use, the language of light. Their plan was audacious. They began to alter their polishing paste. For most of the steel, they used the traditional formula, but for the targeted laws, Nabu-shuma developed a new mixture, adding a minuscule amount of crushed alabaster. The particles were too small to see and too soft to harm the diorite, but they had a unique property. When buffed, these sections reflected sunlight with a colder, sharper sheen. To a casual observer, it was invisible. But if you knew what to look for, the tampered laws would shine differently. The silent war began. A blurring applied at night, a countershine at dawn. The steel became a secret battlefield. But was anyone receiving their message? Months passed in fear. Then one afternoon, the king's chief vizier stood before the steel for an hour, motionless. He wasn't reading the laws. He was watching the light play across the surface as the sun moved. He had seen it, the unnatural glint on the laws of commerce. A secret investigation unraveled the conspiracy. Justice was restored. But for the Musherib, their fate was now sealed. Had they saved the kingdom or signed their own death warrants? They were neither rewarded nor executed. They were simply erased. Their specialized knowledge was a liability the palace could not afford. The guild was disbanded overnight, the art forbidden, the steel cleaned by illiterate slaves under the watchful eye of armed guards. The profession vanished, a casualty of its own quiet courage. But their legacy, the secret of the shining code, was whispered to have been passed down. Could other ancient monuments hold hidden messages, read not in text, but in reflection? These men were the invisible gears in the machine of justice. Their tools, cloth, sand, and unbreakable integrity. They proved you don't need a voice to speak truth to power. Sometimes you just need a way to make it shine. What do you think? Was their silent rebellion an act of ultimate loyalty or treason? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed uncovering the secrets of the Code Steel polishers, be sure to subscribe to Lost Professions for more stories of the jobs time forgot.